next job on the 911 is to shorten these bolts. I bought some new some stainless steel M8 bolts, M8 by 30, so they're 2mm too long, so I guess I could put a washer on them, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut them down with the angle grinder and then test fit the headers. So just a quick tip: when you're cutting down bolts with an angle grinder, it's a bit of a messy affair, so what I tend to do is I put a bolt or a nut on the bolt so that when you make the cut, you undo the nut over the cut, so you take that off and it reforms the thread. I'm also going to put some anti-seize paste on there on all of the bolts. I'm going to put it quite liberally on there as well when I install them, just so I don't have the same problem again, because that would be a right nightmare to have to drill those all out again. That's a job that you only want to do once, unless you're being paid a lot of money for it. All those bolts cut down, filed them off as well. They're a little bit jagged still on the edge, but as you probably saw, I filed them down with the nut still on, and then just to save the thread on the way out. So that's those 12 bolts done. Now I'm going to get the headers and offer them up to the cylinder head using the gaskets. Just cleaned up my mega cheap eBay purchase brackets, which I mentioned are absolutely brand new, so I've cleaned them up. They look pretty good. And I am now going to fit those up to the exhaust brackets, or the engine brackets here. I can't do the headers because I realise I don't even have them with me at the workshop. They are at home in the basement, so that's a bit of a bummer. But I can always carry on with something else, so I'm going to fit these up. Okay, so I'm just cleaning some of these aluminium parts, which are the heat shields, and I'm actually using, it's a alloy wheel cleaner, which absolutely stinks to high heaven, so I'm wearing a cover over my nose and mouth. It's one of those smells that sort of stays with you for a couple of days. So anyway, what it does is you spray it on, it's clear, and it goes this sort of dark blood red colour. So I'm going to wash it off now using just soapy water in this brush. Okay, so I've got those heat shields cleaned up as best I can. I used that wheel cleaner, that alloy wheel cleaner, which really took the dirt off. They're looking pretty shiny. I mean, I could have spent much more time on them and got all of the dirt off, but it's, you know, I could also take these brackets off and repaint them, which I'd like to do at some point, but my concern is I take those brackets off and they'll break the heat shield because they're all so fragile. I mean, in reality, they all need replacing, but I don't know, there's a ton of money there, maybe £300 or £400 there, maybe a little bit less for all those heat shields, but they're all right for the minute, so they're cleaned up. You can see what happens, and this is where I've got those rust spots on these corresponding bolts on the chassis, because those corrode through and then they fall down over the bolts and start rattling on top of the silencers. So what I've done just for now is I've bought new nuts from Porsche, but I've also got some oversized washers which I'll put up on the other side just to support them. They'll sort of be fine for another couple of years, I think, until I can decide whether, or until I decide whether I can afford a new set or not. Yeah, so that's about it for today. I've put these brackets on left and right. As I said, I left the headers at home, so that is the next step. So yeah, getting there slowly but surely. I'm going to let these heat shields dry and put them on the next time. Okay, so I'm back on the Porsche today, and the idea is to fit the heat shields and I've brought the manifolds up, which I'd left behind at the last time I was here. So I'm going to fit those up and yeah, see how it all lines up. Probably going to fit the cats as well, just to get it finished. It's been here for 2 months already, and yeah, what with work and I had a problem with my leg recently. It means I had a leg cast for 2 weeks.
and I couldn't get up here, so it's been very slow going, and the weather's been fantastic outside. Yeah, there it is. Okay, so I've just put that driver's side, that right-hand side manifold on. I tell you, it's really difficult to do it on your own, lying down underneath the car. You've got to line the gasket up and the bolt and so on, and it just kept on dropping. But it's up there now. I've got 2 bolts in there, and I'm going to use some of it's like a metal-free paste, which it stops them from seizing in there. Anti-seize paste in there, but I'll do that on the next ones that go in now. I've just got those 2 in there to hold it, so that's what I'm going to do now. So I'm actually putting quite a bit of this anti-seize paste on these header bolts. This isn't affected by, well, it is affected by heat, but it's got a massive heat range, -40 to +1400 degrees Celsius. And I think these headers run at about, I'm guessing it was probably about 800 or 900 degrees, so that'll be fine. And it just comes to making it a lot easier when I remove the headers again, because I'm sure that's going to happen at some point. But this is about the amount I'm putting on. Okay, so I've now got both headers on, all 12 bolts are in, and I don't know, they look really cool. So that's that side, and that is that side. Okay, so I've just got this bracket on here, which when you're fitting it, this obviously lines up because there are two holes in it here and here, and there's a little locating hole here, and this writing is upside down. And now, let me just get it, I'm putting on the bracket for the catalytic converters, and that, if you look at it, it's a bit like cow horns. It points up with the writing up the correct way, so that goes on there like that. So I'm going to refit the heat shields this afternoon, and as you can see, they are pretty chewed up on some of the edges, but I can't afford to replace all of them at the moment. That would be the logical thing to do. That's what Porsche would do if they were doing this work. They'd replace all of these, but what I've done, because they still work obviously, but what I've done is I've bought some stainless steel oversized washers which will go up underneath, and it will just see them through for another couple of years or so. It's actually quite a big hole back there, but that should do it until I buy some new ones. Okay, so the heat shields are back on using the new washers and nuts there. So that's that. This is where the sports exhaust air tube comes in, and this side is done as well. So what am I going to do now? I am going to, what is the next step? Hang on. Yeah, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten up the engine mounts back up to 85 Newton meters, just to raise the engine back up and get that done. Okay, so you actually need an 18mm socket to do those.
to those engine mounts, which I haven't got, annoyingly, but it's also something I can do later. I'll go and buy one, maybe tomorrow or Saturday, and I can do it from underneath the car, so that's not too much of an issue. But I've done them up pretty tight with the ratchet that I've got there. Okay, so I've put the cats on now. I've used anti-seize paste on all of the nuts and bolts, and put the brackets on underneath there. Yeah, it's really getting there now. I've got to find out the torque wrench settings for those bolts on the manifold to cat flange, but otherwise, yeah, it's really getting there. I've got to clean them up a bit. They're a bit greasy because of my gloves, but yeah, that's how we're getting on. Okay, so I'm at the point now where I'm going to put one of the silencers on. So I've got these brackets on here, left and right. I've done these bolts up. I haven't done them to a particular torque setting because I don't know what it is, but I've just done them really tight. So now I'm going to go ahead and put on the silencers. So quite exciting. Okay, so I've got this silencer on. It's quite a loose fit on that bracket down there actually, but I am just going to fit the little clips there for the actuators. So that's the part number for the clip, and yeah, I'm going to fit that now. Okay, so I'm just tidying everything up here, the cables and everything. I've put new clips on. You can just about see that there for the O2 sensors, and I marked them up obviously which one came, which of these two plugs fitted together. So I marked this one with a 1 and this one with a 1, and the rest is obvious. I did the same on the other side too, but those are all back in place now. I had to clean up the terminals a little bit because of some overspray from the catalytic converters when I painted them, but that's all cleaned up, and those ones are also clean and back in place with all of their relevant clips there. There's another clip down there, and yeah, cleaned it up a little bit in here. It's got really dusty from all the angle grinding I did by taking off the headers, which is a bit worrying really, because there's a lot of that metal dust around. Ideally I'd I don't know, steam clean the whole thing. But yeah, the difference in size and weight, I'll show you in a minute, of these two silencers. You can see really, I mean, there's a massive difference in size. This stainless steel version, the new one, is so much smaller than this. On here you can really see how this sort of got tons of space with these heat shields. When the old ones came off, they were totally filling this entire space here. So this is entirely filled by silencer, but as you can see, there's a big difference. If you put it like this,
you can see even more. Look, that gives you an idea of the difference in size between the two. I'll put the weights on. Unfortunately I haven't got any scales to weigh it, but the difference in weight is quite significant. I mean, it's heavy, but this is really heavy in comparison. Just thought I'd mention with this side, the airline, the braided airline, which is original to the car because it came with a sports exhaust, wasn't long enough to fit over this heat shield and then down to the actuator here, the servo. So what I had to do is just make a little hole in here, and it sort of lines up. If you can see that with the hole in the body there, which actually I think is a nicer way of doing it, because the other side I think is a bit messy. It sort of cuts into the top of the heat shield and then goes down over there. It would actually be better if I cut a little hole in there as well, but I don't know, I'll leave it like that for now I think, and see how we get on. I thought what I'd do is, because I want to run the car with the silencers just to check for leaks and everything, so I don't really want to do that. Well, I can't really do that until I've fixed the broken oil neck, because I've got to check which one it is, but I think you're supposed to remove this part of the cooling system, or this part maybe, before you start the work. It's preventative really, because a couple of people I've seen on YouTube have done it and they've broken, I think it's either this one or this one. I have to check the video again, but there is a useful video on YouTube. And what else do I want to do? There's something else I have to remove. I think maybe one of these airlines. But anyway, so to replace the oil neck, you've got to remove the serpentine belt. You've got to remove the alternator, and then you can get round to the bottom of it there and replace it. So that's the next step. Okay, so I've just tried removing that bolt here, which is a E14 fitting, which fits on there like that, and I've moved it very slightly because I'm very wary of all bolts on this car. You know, they turn and then they just shear, so I turned it very gingerly to the right and to the left, and it moved very, very slightly, but when I checked the shaft going down through the alternator, that wasn't moving at all, so that means that's flexing between this first arm of the alternator and this bearing, which is not good, because as soon as it starts flexing it gets weak, and then the next thing is break. So what I've done is I've put some WD-40, quite a lot of WD-40 on this joint. Annoyingly, I've been oiling up the rear joint for a couple of weeks actually, but I didn't do this first joint up at the top here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the sensible thing, which is very unlike me, put some more WD-40 on it, leave it, go home, and then come back to it tomorrow. Okay, so I'm back to the alternator removal here with this pulley bolt, which was absolutely seized yesterday, and as I said to you in the video yesterday, it was looking like it was going to snap, so I put a load of WD-40 on it, went home and came back. It's now 4 o'clock in the afternoon the next day. What I did was I just put on a solid tool like this with obviously the fitting, and was hammering it because I haven't got a hammer drill or an air gun or anything like that. So it did crack, it went, and it didn't feel like it's broken. So I put more WD-40 on it, and I'm going to try now using a wrench. So as I say, it did just crack, quite a loud crack. Maybe I'll just go back the other way, just to make sure it is actually moving. Yeah, you can hear that. That's the noise I meant. So that is definitely moving. So, yeah. Ah, fantastic. I was so worried that was going to break yesterday. I think leaving it overnight with the WD-40 was definitely the wise idea.
I'm just going to take that all the way off now. Because what they do is, I don't know if you can see that, but I think up until the facelift, they used normal hexagonal bolts, which clearly have a lot more strength and integrity than these silly things. So I was a bit concerned it was going to break, but yeah, and they changed over, as I say, and they don't seem to have as much, they don't seem as strong because the heads are so much smaller. But anyway, don't tempt fate, because obviously this is working. I'm going to take this out now. Let's see. Perfect. So here's the bearing. I mean, what I should probably do now, while I've got this off, is replace the bearing. But because I've just gone and filled all that up with WD-40. But anyway, there's the head. You can see that, and that's how long that bolt is. Let me just take that out just to see. I'm going to clean that up obviously before I put it back in, but yeah, don't know if you just saw any of that, but there we go. I think also the bearing is fine in there. Right, so the next thing I need to do is loosen this here. I'll put some WD-40 on that already. That's the lower bolt. Should have done that last night and the weeks going up into this, but I didn't. It's always the way. But so what I need to do now, take this bolt, put it back into there, and just put it back in far enough and hammer on this until that bushing pushes out far enough to be able to move this alternator out. So this bottom bolt here came out much easier than this one did. I've just screwed that back into the bushing at the back there, which you can just about see at the end of my finger, end of this bolt. You've got to pound on this to push that bushing essentially through the corresponding hole or arm like this at the back of the alternator. Then you can lift that over the bracket on the engine and pull it forward. There are two connections on the back which you have to remove to get the alternator out. But as a safety guard, you have to take this off. Somebody's recommended to take this off just so you don't break anything when you're pulling that alternator out. Also gives you some more space. So that is the next step. Okay, so I've been pounding on that for a little while with this pretty large club hammer. And it has moved fractionally, you can see, and I don't actually think it needs to be moved that much because I've just got a wooden hammer handle under there at the moment. I really don't want to bend anything when it's down there that I can't see. Always have to be careful because there are some pipes lurking, but I'm just, oh, there you go. So there you go. That is how it goes. So, obviously it's not out yet, but that has popped over the back. The bush is open far enough to be able to get that. Can't bloody gnaw. Okay, so you gotta, I might have to just put it back down. Yeah, I see what they're saying with these. That's why they tell you to move this, because it's right in the way. I tell you what, I'd prefer to take that off really. Let's just make a note. Let's do that quickly. Try and get that off there. Just so I don't really want to break anything else. Obviously all these rubber hoses are probably very expensive at Porsche. So I'm just going to move that back. How can I move that to back down in there? Don't lose it. Just so I can get this up. Yeah, that's it. Look, that's why they tell you to do that. How the bloody hell? How are you going to do that then? Oh, I know. Okay, so let's take this out. Let's take this out and maybe off. You'd be able to get it out by moving that. Bit trial and error here because I haven't done this before. But
take that out. And let's see now if I can push that beyond there and get that up at the end. Because that's really tight, what with this water pipe here. I wonder if they're saying, I think you're supposed to remove this water pipe as well. Somebody was saying it's impossible to do this job without breaking this clip here. So with any luck, I'm going to prove them wrong, but obviously if I'm unlucky, I will prove them right. It's not exactly an expensive part, famous last words, but it'd be really nice to get that out without buggering it up. Or at least so you can reuse it. Go on. The thing is, with all of these components, these plastic components in the engine bay, you beauty. Okay, so let's take that off. I'm going to actually take that clip off. Proof, there we go, proof that I did it without breaking it. Well, I've put it on the floor now and I'll probably stand on it, but hey ho. Let's try and move that out there. And get this. Yeah, you see what's happening? That's a pest, because what's happening is it's banging on the intake plenum. Oh, now then. Let's see if you can push it back. Oh, yes. Yeah, you can push it back down into the engine. Okay, come on. Let's put a cloth down there. Don't want to scratch up the parts which are looking good. Right. So, let me get the camera in there so you can actually see. Okay, so there you can see it. So what you have to do is you have to push the alternator sort of back down into the engine bay, and then you can lever it over that bracket down there, because what happens is, you probably couldn't see it, is it was banging on the top of this plenum just here, or the intake manifold, I guess it's called. So if my light doesn't stop messing about, come on, focus then. I suppose it can't with this crappy light. So these are two connections I've got to undo, there and there. So once I've done that, I'll take it out and give it a blast with the air cleaner and clean up everything in there, because that probably hasn't ever been, probably has never seen the light of day since the car was new. So I'm really pleased. God, that's gone well. Okay, so on the back of that, careful you don't do it up rather than undo it. I realised I was pushing quite hard the wrong way. So that is a 13mm socket on the back there. It's not on there hugely tight, and that is the connection. So I've disconnected that other connector here, and there we are. One original 2004 Porsche 996 alternator, which, until I drove it into this garage, was working pretty well. It's a solid bearing there, there's no play in there. As I say, I don't really know how best to clean these up. I don't suppose you're supposed to put any cleaning fluid on there or anything, but I'll give it a blast with the air gun. Maybe give it a bit of a clean up. Yeah, that's a bit tight actually. That is the, it's a clutch mechanism in here, but it's a bit stiff. Anyway, there we are, out. And just a quick look in the hole where it came out of, you can see it's quite dirty, but for the first, I'm looking in there for the first time now as well, and it all looks pretty good, pretty good. There's a starter motor back there, can't see anything because I'm in the shadow obviously, but there is the starter motor. Anyway, but that's how we're looking, pretty dirty actually. Okay, so I thought I'd just explain this a little bit. This is the alternator. I've cleaned it up a little bit. Let me just get rid of that. So those are the connections on the back. There's a plug right in there.
and there's a 13mm socket there, nut and bolt there. This is worth checking here. This is the, as I said before, this is the one-way clutch on this thing. So when the engine drives, it drives it, but if the engine on deceleration, it allows it to slip back. So you can feel it turns it that way and slips that way. So the bushing, here's the bushing on the other side. That is essentially the bushing which you have to move in and out. So by pounding it, I was pushing the bushing back that way to allow it past the bracket on the engine. And when you tighten this back up again, it pulls the bushing through this hole here and tight against the bracket on the engine. So that is what you're pounding on. Some people, it's been known for this to snap off. God knows what, I think it's about £200 to £300, maybe $350 for a new alternator, not from Porsche, obviously a reconditioned one. So it's worth putting some WD-40 on that on a couple of days up to when you're going to do this job. So that is it out, it's cleaned as much as I can do it really within reason, and I'm going to put it all back together, well, once I've put the oil neck in. Okay, so I'm just getting to these very tricky bolts here at the back of the oil neck. One's to the side, one's right at the back. It's very difficult to get a socket set in there. Obviously with all the right tools, I'm sure it'd be a darn sight easier, but at the moment I'm just concentrating on not dropping the socket somewhere in the back of the engine, because I'm doing it by my fingertips at the moment. So this is almost out. I've used the air gun to blow away any debris or anything. I don't want any crap going down into the engine. There it is. They're not tightened up very tight at all. So you have to bear that in mind when you're tightening it back up again. It's only plastic after all. So just going to pull this up, and there we are. There it is. That is the oil filler neck with its O-ring there. I've got new O-rings and so on, but that is it in all its glory. So this is where it broke. When I picked it up from Porsche in Dresden, they said, yeah, it's not surprising that you broke it doing the work that you were doing. It happens to us all the time. The reason is this is original obviously, and the plastic gets very brittle over time, and through the vibration of the engine the whole time, they just get very brittle and they break with the least little thing. You can actually see, oops, the connecting point there on the corrugation is extremely thin. So that might be their way of calling it a design fault, but it's not very flexible anymore, and the new one is flexible. So yeah, I'm going to reuse the cap, but there's a new O-ring for beneath the cap and on the engine block itself. So my torch is sort of very broken that I'm using on the car, so I've got to get a new one. But anyway, just getting around there far enough to see that's what it looks like. So that is the oil neck removed from the top of the engine. And the torch has died. Okay, so this is the new neck. Here's the old one obviously, but just going to get the new one out here just to make sure I'm putting the this is the part number of the neck. You can see that 997 107 13100. 73 euros it cost, which I guess is about, I don't know, £68 or $80, maybe $75. So that is the neck itself, pretty flexible, like I said before. So these are the part numbers for the O-rings, and this is the other one. At the moment I'm not sure which one is which, but going by the colour of that, let me just check actually, where is the top of that? Where is the top of the old one, please? Worst thing in this, well, in this garage, it's all entirely down to me, in this working environment is me losing stuff. You spend so much time looking for stuff you put down. So now I'm looking for the oil neck, which I guess you can probably see, but I can't. So where the hell is it? The top of the oil neck. I'm going mad. Is it in there? Is it under there? No, it's not. Jesus. I don't know what I do with these things, honestly. You put them down 1 minute, you're looking at it, and it's, oh, Jesus, there it is. Alright, so it's fallen back down there, which is annoying, because I'm obviously using that again. Anyway, here it is. So let's take that off. So that one, I think that one is this one. That one, let me have a look. In fact, that one looks like that one. What's that? Yeah, okay. So this one here, this part number here, which is a black O-ring, is the one that goes on the end, end of the neck to the engine. And the orange one is the one that goes in the top of the filler cap, which is strange because it actually looks a bit different, but maybe that's just because it's old, this one. So I'm going to swap those out now. Point, when you take this out, very important that you bang that bush back down through the hole, because I didn't do that, and I tried to put it back in, and there's just not enough clearance to put it in snugly. So I had to take it out again, bang that in, and you can see it pushes through the other side. So very important you do that. Okay, so I've just got that done. So my camera died just as I finished the job last night, but I had to rush off for we were out to dinner last night, so couldn't hang around too long. But anyway, what I wanted to say was I managed to get it done in time, and got the alternator back in, tightened up the bolts, top and bottom there. What else did I do? Oh yeah, got all the air lines plugged back in. I'm just going through it now just to make sure I've done everything. That's that. I've got these tightened up, those back in. I put this airline back in. I also managed to do the job without breaking that bracket there. I've got everything else in. All the O2 sensors are plugged in the new brackets, and so on, going down there. The new clamps, you can just about see them there. I also got some paint on that air conditioning. I think that's the air conditioning pump. No, it's power steering pump by the looks of it. What else? What else? What else? Yeah, that's pretty much it. Got the alternator cleaned up a little bit. So now I'm going to put the serpentine belt back on, and I'm actually going to fill up some coolant. So that is the next step. Okay, so got the serpentine belt back in, and the way I got that right was just by taking a photograph of it before I took it off. So it's just a reversal of putting it on, obviously using this socket on the tensioner here, and yeah, getting it back on like that.